All right, and again, just a reminder for folks as you come into the lobby.
I'm so sorry, Courtney. I
That's
totally
okay.
muted you.
Jill beat me to it. We'll be muting folks as you arrive, but please feel free to unmute to ask questions through the duration of our session here.
All right, Jill is a well-oiled machine this Friday morning. All right, thank you all. So have you hit record yet, Court?
Yes, we are recording.
Fantastic, we're recording. Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's clearly a Friday morning. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Friday morning for the Real Property Data Collection webinar. Who doesn't want to start out their Friday morning with a little federal reporting? I don't think we're going to need the whole hour. This is a pretty basic collection that we're doing, and really it's very tasky work. It's not, you're not running numbers or anything like that. We recognize that you are in a very challenging and complicated budget season. So we're very much hoping that this is, as I said, tasky and something that you just sort of pick away at, or you can assign to someone, just train them up on what they need, what information they need to pull, and then go ahead and do it. So I am, as you all know, Jill Briggs Campbell, Agency of Education Director of Operations. I'm joined by Courtney O'Brien, who's our operations manager. And I'm just going to do a couple of quick introductory remarks, and then Courtney will be leading. We are recording this. We'll go ahead and close caption it, get it up on the website. And then you can also expect this afternoon, coming from me, an email that goes out to all business managers. Please feel free to forward it. That is has a, an overview of this information we're presenting here. We'll include the slide deck from this presentation so you can kind of get started, and also a memo from Bill Bates, sort of directing you on what you need to do for this federal reporting. There's also going to be a short little blurb that will go out to your superintendents this afternoon so that they're aware that you all have been tasked with yet another federal reporting requirement. And then if you have any questions, you can reach out to Courtney or myself. And actually, we're going to have Kate Horton, who you all know from like our federal construction work and other work. She's going to be managing like the actual collection of the data. And so you'll be hearing from her as well. So you'll have kind of 3 points of contact for getting this work done. So with that, Court, if you want to go ahead and share screen with the PowerPoint. As I said, I don't think this will take the full hour, but we want to leave time for questions. And also, just want to give a shout out to Rick Pembroke in particular, and some other folks, some other business managers. But Rick has been really awesome in working with us for almost a year now, I think, on this requirement. And we really made an effort to ensure that this aligned with your systems that you already have, and that it's going to be hopefully the least amount of pain that we can inflict upon you. So Rick, thank you so much for your partnership on this. It's really, really appreciated. All right, Court, go ahead and share screen.
I will in just a moment. Dan, I see your question. There are no handouts yet. Shortly after this presentation, hopefully later today, we'll have some handouts to send out. So we'll have a memo from CFO Bill Bates. There's some information going out in the SOUPS update, and then there will be a copy of the slide deck. All right, and Jill, we still have some folks joining us through the lobby. Would you mind taking over controls for that while I am presenting here? Thank you, ma'am. Okay. All right, folks. So as Jill mentioned, we're here today to talk about real property data collection. So this is an existing federal regulation. We'll talk a bit more about exactly which regulation in a moment. But this is, we have not been in a situation in previous years where we have had, oh, just a moment, I'm getting some feedback that there's no presentation available. Quick yes, no from folks in the audience. Can people see the slides?
I can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I can see.
Dan, I'm going to put the slide deck in the, it's not like the final, it's not the PDF. I'll put it in the chat though, so you can follow along with us at home.
Sounds like we may have course corrected in my stalling there. So that's great to hear. All right, folks. So real property data collection. Good question to answer. First and foremost, what is real property? What are we talking about when we say real property here? So specifically in this context, we are talking about how the Federal Uniform Guidance defines real property. This is defined as land, including land improvements, structures, and appurtenances thereto, but excludes movable machinery and equipment. So essentially, these are properties and structures, equipment that materially increase the value of your property. Some examples include, but again are not limited to, HVAC systems or similar infrastructure, pavilions and outdoor learning spaces. So we've constructed a new learning space in the outside space, renovations or structural improvements to kitchens, community spaces, indoor learning spaces like gymnasium repair, etc. So thinking about building of new structures, significant improvements to infrastructure or immovable equipment, such as maybe perhaps walk-in freezers versus a refrigerator that can get rolled in and out. The reporting requirements are driven by Federal Uniform Guidance. We have linked those specific references throughout the slides and then within the memo for you here if anyone is curious. The requirement is applicable to any LEA, any SUSD, or independent school that has used federal funds to either purchase or make improvements to real property. So again, thinking about that definition of real property. Lisa asks, does this include playgrounds and similar equipment? It certainly can, if it has been purchased with federal funds. And for most entities, this requirement was activated for the first time in recent history due to the disbursement of federal emergency funds, notably the CARES Act that went out. And we'll update the slides. I see this says March 2022. Jill, is that up to date?
No, ma'am, that should be March 2020. So this is going to be your ESSER 1, your GEAR, your ESSER 2, your GEAR 2, your ARP ESSER, ARP, IDEA, child nutrition, if you've made updates, so USDA funds. So at this point, it could include many federal funds, but really prior to March 2020, this wasn't something that really we had access to federal funds to make real property improvements. So that's why this is kind of a new trigger point for us.
Exactly. So really the first that we are aware of is that initial CARES Act distribution in March of 2020. But again, as Jill mentioned, there have been several iterations of federal funding provided since then. And if you have used any of that funding to make improvements or to purchase new real property, it would need to be reported under this requirement. So before we move on to actually reviewing the reporting tool, are there any questions about the requirement itself, what's covered? This was something we talked about at length with some of our in-house subject matter expertise. So I'll pause for a moment. Any questions? All right, we'll move ahead.
Sorry, Courtney, I just wanted to let folks know, I've been flailing around in the background here, because I did not create the invite for this. I cannot upload this into the chat. So apologies, okay. Email me, folks, if you need this. But again, we're going to distribute it later today. So.
Yep. And we can take a few minutes at the end to upload it so folks can grab it before we leave. All right, so before we move on to reviewing the actual tool itself, I will just let folks know this, again, this is a new requirement. It's not something that many folks have familiarity with. I would be surprised if any do, quite frankly. And as you're working through this and trying to determine which funds need to be reported or which projects need to be reported, please feel free to reach out to us and we would be happy to assist. So I think err on the side of caution if you've used any of these federal funds to use towards purchases for real property and you're not sure if it should be reported under this new requirement, let us know and we'd rather help you out on the front end than miss something later on. All right, so the link to the form itself is here under reporting tool. Couple of rules of the game here. So the way that the tool is set up, you will submit one web form per real property entry. So meaning if you have used federal funds or multiple federal funding sources to fund multiple real property projects, say you have improved HVAC systems and also built a playground, you would have 2 web submissions total. So you would put 1 in each. The form should be completed by a district business official or designee. It's fairly simplistic. As long as you have someone who has access to the funding information, this can be completed by anyone. It doesn't need to be your office business manager. It doesn't need to be a superintendent. It can be anyone in that business office space that has the information needed to make the entries. Any projects in progress should be reported after reaching substantial completion. So for example, if you have done an HVAC system replacement, we know that's a pretty lengthy piece of work. If you haven't yet reached that formal substantial completion with your contractors, that doesn't yet need to be reported. We're really looking for the point in time when this is complete and is handed off to you as an entity and an asset for your district. The deadline for reporting, and when we're talking about reporting, we're thinking about all funds, all payments made since March 13th, 2020, again, with the beginning of that CARES Act distribution to current. And we're looking for a reporting deadline this year of January 19th, 2024. So everything that we've spent federal funds on since the beginning of 2020 needs to be reported in this time frame. Moving forward, we expect that we will have an annual data collection. We will need to continue this for at least 15 years based on the regulation that requires this reporting. But we are hopeful that
15
in
years.
future, excuse me?
Sorry. Got
That's okay.
My bad. I'm
we're-
mumbling. Sorry, Jill. Sorry, Courtney.
Rob, I would be lying if I said I didn't sit here and talk to myself the entire day long. So you're just catching me in a good moment of focus here. So no
They
worries.
say speaking out loud is good for you, but I'm not so sure.
I think we'll go with that today. All right. So our hope is that
Court, can I,
Yes.
I'm just gonna add one kind of item here. This is something I brought up at VASBO last Friday. So a couple of things to note here. We recognize that this year, this is gonna be a little bit of an intensive data entry process, right? We're gonna do it once, we're gonna get everything in that you've done. Some of you maybe have not done a lot of real property improvements using federal funds. So this might just be 1 or 2 things. Some of y'all have a lot of projects that we've been, seeing them come through. So this might be a little bit more of an intensive process, but our intention is to then take this information. I think we're likely looking at GMS, and it will just become an annual data collection. And the idea here is that we'll just have kind of your list of stuff in there. You will make updates as the real property sort of depreciates or reaches kind of the end of its useful life. And then if you have any new entries, that you would just add a new entry. So we anticipate in the future that this will be a pretty light touch for you. This year, it's just going to be sort of a hassle. I also want to signal to you all, though, that this is not just COVID federal emergency funds. So a lot of your improvements are going to have been made with ESSER dollars, but we're talking about Efficiency Vermont indoor air quality grants. We're talking about maybe you did coronavirus relief fund HVAC improvements way back in 2020. Remember that? Like we had like 4 months and everyone was doing things as quickly as they could. We're also talking about future funding, right? So maybe you've received some of the ARPA, SFRF, I cannot remember the name of these. It's like the heating grants from the Department of Public Service. That would be included here. Potentially, maybe in the future, you access EPA dollars or Department of Energy dollars, which we really want to go after to make those like major improvements for HVAC, or you put in a solar panels. So we need to get used to this as a thing that we may be doing kind of for a while, because we do have sort of this unprecedented access to federal dollars to make these improvements. So be aware that this year, and we are fully cognizant that this year it's going to be a hassle, but don't sort of just think this is a one-off and then we're not going to do it again. But the intention is it becomes a lighter and lighter touch as we move further and further along. So just want to note that. And Courtney, if it's okay, it looks like there's a couple things in the chat just to clarify.
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. And Jill, that was precisely the right moment to interject. That was exactly what I was going to share, is just I'll reiterate, I'll reiterate what Jill stated, that we completely appreciate that this is likely to be a heavy lift for a few districts. And we're here to work with you as often and as early as needed on this. The plan is to be able to feed back this information to you all in future years. So this year you need to feed it to us. We don't have access to this information. And then in future years, it would be more of just an update on a couple of the fields that we'll talk about in a moment here, a couple of the necessary fields.
And so Tara, I think that I answered your question. I know that you, thinking specifically of your district, you have received those Efficiency Vermont funds. So yes. And the Department of Public Service funds, yes. Think of this is uniform guidance, right? So this is not ed dollars. This is all federal funds to make real property improvements. So this goes up to kind of that highest level, that 2 CFR 200 level, not kind of the Edgar US Ed dollar level. And then Dan, I think that I probably addressed your question there, but the ESSERs are all going to be done next year. What will be collected after that? So if you made improvements using your ESSER dollars for the remaining useful life of those real property improvements, you will be doing updates to it. And again, as Courtney said, minor updates, right? So you'll see when we get into the form, I think that will become a little bit more self-evident that what we're looking at there. Yeah, go ahead, Court.
Oh, thank you. The other fund I wanted to flag, because this is something brought to us by our child nutrition team, USDA dollars also do apply here. So again, kind of in that realm of uniform guidance, just be aware that any USDA funding used to make improvements to kitchens or food preparation spaces or cafeterias or eating spaces would fall into this requirement as well. Just going to address a couple of the questions. So Dan asks, the ESSERs are all going to be done next year. What will be collected after that? So again, I think we've talked through that. There's some updates that need to occur. And then also this is an ongoing requirement for any federal funding. So beyond ESSER, if we're receiving federal funds, those need to be reported. Rick asks, substantial completion as of what date? Really, it's anything that's substantially completed through the end of our reporting deadline. So if you have projects that you're anticipating will reach substantial completion between now and January 19th, please enter those. Again, this is our heavy hitter year. This is the year that we want to collect as much information as we can, and so that we can start to feed those updates back out to you with annual collections upcoming. So if you have projects that are just at that nearing completion point, let's try to get them in. If they are not going to reach that substantially complete point until after the January 19th deadline, let's wait and we can report them in the next collection. All right, so we'll move ahead. It looks like Jill's addressing a couple of things in chat. So the tool itself is a Cognito form. The formatting should be somewhat familiar to folks. I know we use this for several data collections here. The beginning of the form is the introduction. So again, so you have kind of a real-time reminder of what it is we're doing. We have links and references to the uniform guidance here if folks want to take a closer look. And again, defining again for you what real property actually means in this context so that you have an idea of what we're looking for. Again, this can be submitted by any person who has access to the information. So it can be delegated down to any person within the business office or folks that work closely with the business offices. We are looking for information on who to contact. So if you are the person that's submitting and perhaps there's a question about the form later on, please let us know who we should be reaching out to validate that information. And we have set this up in drop-down style, so you should be able to select SUSD, and then your SUSD should appear in the list, so you won't need to free type that. So again, a couple of just basic questions about where the project or property improvement or acquisition occurred. Let us know, was it within a school? Was it within the district building? The address is important. If you do have multiple buildings or structures at an address and you're able to define that. So for example, there are multiple suites or there are, other ways that you define that or split that address up, please include that here. And federal regulation does require us to report on the ownership type. So if this is co-owned with another entity, you will need to indicate that. We have included everything that we could possibly think of here, but certainly if it is co-owned with a different type of entity, please use the other section here to identify what that would be. So this is where we get into the meat of it, right? So what are we reporting on? You'll have a choice between acquired and improved. And really what we're thinking about here is, again, if it's acquired, what's that date of substantial completion or the date of purchase? And similarly for improvements, what's that date of substantial completion? So I have updated and improved my HVAC system. At what point were the contractors able to hand that back over and say we have reached substantial completion? If there are questions about that date, again, please reach out and we're happy to work through it. Moving forward, sorry, got a little tongue tied there. So date of acquisition, again, date of substantial completion, record or ID number is unique to you and your district. So whatever identification you use within your own systems, this will be that touch point back and forth. So in future years, 10 years down the road, when we're asking for updates on this property, and perhaps someone has won the lottery and moved on, how will you be able to reconnect this entry to your accounting systems? So that record or ID number is your unique identifier. And a brief description of real property. Similarly, this should be enough information for both your team and our team to identify what it is we're talking about. So please don't just put HVAC, for example. Let us know what happened to the HVAC, right? Was it an improvement? Was it a new structure? At what school was it placed into, etc. And then ultimately you should select one or the other. So if you've acquired something new, please fill out the acquisition questions. If you've improved upon something, please fill out the second set there for improvement to real property. And then the total cost of the improvement or acquisition is noted in that last space there. So what was the total cost? This total cost should include both federal and other sources. So how much did we spend on this particular project? Okay, once you've completed that section, we will ask for you to identify which federal fund was used for the federal share of this reporting. So we've used an example here of ESSER $2. You'll need to indicate the name of the federal fund, the ALN, and the federal share used. So again, if the total project cost $500,000, but we used only $400,000 of ESSER 2 funds, we should indicate that here. You also have an option to say whether or not we've used more than one federal fund. So if this was a major project, did we piece together a few different federal funds to complete that? In this example, only one was used. However, in this example, a non-federal share was also indicated. So perhaps we had some local funding that supported this as well. Again, that total cost matching up your total cost on the prior question. I will say, the total cost indicator here is going to calculate for you based on what you enter in this slide for federal share and non-federal share. So that should be a nice check and balance for you. You'll enter it manually up top, and then it will calculate again here based on the combination of funds that you indicate. Just pausing for questions. The last entry here on this part of the report is end of useful life. So again, this is something that you should be receiving through either contractors, or it should be something already available to you in your accounting systems. But we need to include this. This is going to be part of our ongoing reporting. So we want to be able to we don't want to be able to, we need to be able to provide updates on these real property improvements and purchases through at least the end of their useful life. And this is how we will understand when that time actually occurs. Lastly, there's an indicator, you'll see the toggle switch here at the bottom is your federally required insurance coverage for this real property current. We hope that everyone will be answering yes. However, if you are going to answer no, I will suggest you may want to reach out to someone here just to let us know that this is what the case is. We obviously don't want you to report something that's inaccurate, but this would be surprising for us to see, and it may be helpful to let us know ahead of time. All right, so then again, just assuring that this was as up to date and current and accurate to the best of your knowledge at the time. This does not need to be completed by a superintendent or building leader or even a business manager, supervisor or high level official. This is just to assure that the submitter has done their part to make sure that this is accurate and complete. And pause for questions. So again, we have our contact information listed at the end of the slide deck here. I'll give folks a moment to capture that if you want to, but then we will end the slides and open up for questions. Okay, apologies, folks. 5-second warning. Furiously scribble if you need to. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Dan, go ahead.
This is Dan. Yeah, Jill. So basically, I mean, I know you guys. I wrote down HVAC, indoor, outdoor learning space, gym repair, playground
Mhm.
equipment. Is there? I don't know. Do you have some kind of a list that, of course, is not going to be absolutely accurately
Mhm.
complete, but do you have a longer list that we could maybe have access to?
So Dan, I mean, I could say, I can say yes and no. So there's that federal definition, which Courtney provided, right, which is a pretty broad scope. I will tell you that one of our kind of AOE level checks that we're going to do on this is we are going to be using it's also not comprehensive, right? Because there are other federal funds that like we don't do prior approval for, but anything for which the AOE has done prior approval through the Federal Construction App, essentially Kate's going to be like pulling down that giant list of projects and then trying to do a cross check against them. That's not going to be a foolproof method, just so we're really clear. So it might, a lot of you have done like outdoor learning pavilions, right? That would also be included, just like a playground would be. As Courtney pointed out, improvements to like kitchen preparation spaces that you may have used ESSER funds, you may have used USDA funds. CTE centers, please pay attention there. You may have used some of your GEAR funds or ESSER funds to make improvements to CTE centers, like those industrial kind of spaces. Other folks, feel free to jump on because y'all know better than I do what all of your projects are. Some of you have reconfigured your classrooms to kind of modernize learning. Bathroom reno, yeah, if it's sort of that substantial kind of renovation there, that's a really good one, George. We've seen quite a few people do like locker rooms. And yes, so Dan, I don't know that I mean, those are, please folks, please continue to throw things in the chat, but it's those like changes or substantial improvements. You may have redone your roof, you may have replaced your windows, those really kind of major changes that you've made. Court, do you want to add anything there?
Sure, maybe just a bit. I think rather than being able to provide a full list, it's actually it's two tests that we're applying to the purchase or the way that you've spent the funds. And the first is, did you spend them on land or structural improvements, kind of excluding that movable machinery, like again, that kind of industrial fridge or freezer likely doesn't count, but the walk-in freezer that's been installed in your kitchen would. So that's test number one. And then test number two being, does it materially increase the value of your space? So again, we're not talking about new paint going on the walls necessarily. We're talking about like new structures, new things that would increase the property value of the space.
Elizabeth has a really good, thank you, Elizabeth Atkins in the chat. Yes. So it would be funded federally that ends up being included in your fixed asset improvement or large permanent equipment list. Yes, exactly, Elizabeth. And that was one of the things that we worked with Rick on is like, you've got this information already, hopefully, being tracked in your own kind of accounting systems. So all you really, this is why I'm saying this is not like a super technical thing. It's really like taking that data, shoving it into this data form. We will then get it into our system and then you're just going to be updating it. So yes, that is absolutely correct. That's the place that I would go. That's assuming that you're keeping up on that list. So maybe this is also a good time to check that. Yes, it doesn't matter who the pass-through entity is. That is correct. If it's a federally funded real property improvement, again, this goes up to 2 CFR 200 uniform guidance. So that includes all of your federal funds, which can be a pretty large list at this point. And I would be very surprised, frankly, if other entities that are doing this have their eyes on this requirement. So we're going to help you all by collecting it all. It will be in one place. And then if another agency at some point realizes that they're supposed to be doing this, you can say like, aha, we've already done this with AOE. This, you know, we're covered here, and they can reach out directly to us. Yeah. Dan, you feel, yeah, okay, I see you're feeling better about it. Yeah. Good questions.
Okay. Looks like questions are slowing a bit here.
Dawn had a good one. Dawn.
Mm.
The interstates always break my brain a little bit. I mean, New Hampshire's got to be doing this too, Dawn. So
I think we may want to follow up on that one.
yeah,
This
I mean,
is-
so
this
the answer
is-
is Dawn, yes, at some point it's got to be collected.
Yeah.
If you want to go ahead and just submit it to us, that doesn't hurt, right? And just to be clear, so everybody knows, this is one of those collections that the state, AOE, is just required to collect it and hold it and show that we're doing it, but we don't actually send it up to the feds. So we're all just,
Yeah.
we all just have to do this for audit, and then we got to have our little documentation. It's not, this is not like annual performance reporting where it goes up somewhere. It's just, we have to do it. So Don, I don't think it would hurt to just include your New Hampshire properties as well. We will be keepers of it. And again, all states are required to do this. I would say that Vermont's probably, even though we feel like we're behind the ball, we're actually in conversations with my state partners, we're way ahead of the game. So Don will go ahead and send it to us. We'll hold it. And then when New Hampshire catches up, we can, you know, you can let them know that you've already done this here, and we can help with that. Yeah.
And I do want
That's
to just add a bit to that. So Jill's absolutely correct. This is really at this point just we need to do the exercise because regulation requires it. But I will say we have been hearing increasingly more through our national partners that this is showing up on audits, and that our auditors are really expecting to look into this with some degree of detail. So it's, yes, there's not really an action yet to be taken on the other end of this, but we do fully expect that this is something we're going to be asked to provide, and to provide it accurately in our upcoming audit seasons. Oh gosh, and I had another thought there, but I have completely lost it. So we'll come back to that.
I will say it's on our single audit this year. It's popped up. And so if you are an interstate district, Don, I would expect that New Hampshire is going to go, oh, and you might be hearing from them very soon. Like I said, I think we're actually pretty far ahead of the game in that we have a process and we're doing this and we're demonstrating that we're actually meeting the requirement. I would not be surprised if you heard from New Hampshire sometime in the winter after they go through their single audit and realize they're way behind on this.
Yeah. And Jill, that's exactly the prompting I needed. Just a little bit of background on how we developed this and why it's taken us some time. Again, we are one of the states that is kind of moving forward with this on our own. There was a small group of states that some of our in-house subject matter expertise, Cassandra Ryan had really been helping us as our in-house SME on this. And she had connected with a few other states, and they were receiving the same information that we're presenting today. So there is an acknowledgement that, again, like there's not a list of exact specific examples that you should be drawing from. And this is a little bit of an interpretation issue around what actually is considered real property. So we are doing the best we can with the information that we have, and then I wouldn't be surprised if in future collections we're able to narrow that down a bit more based on feedback from our auditors and based on feedback from other states as we all catch up on this reporting requirement together. Bottom line, bear with us all. I think this is new. Well, this is certainly new for everyone. And again, acknowledging that this may impact some districts significantly more than others, and use Jill and myself as a resource. We can help connect you with other folks here at the agency if and when needed. But we understand, and we're here to help where we can.
Yeah, and I think that just from a process standpoint, you sort of know what to expect. Again, this is our first stab at this. We're going to kind of work it out as we go, but you're going to submit the data. Mid-January is kind of the deadline to do it. So pick away at it. Please assign it if you can. And then I think what you can expect is that poor Kate will be taking all the data in. We'll do a crosswalk with our federal construction prior approvals. And anything else that we can think of, frankly, like the USDA kind of big equipment, that kind of thing. Probably reach out to our partners, Chris Hine and Andy Perchlik over in DPS. As you all know, I also manage the Efficiency Vermont IAQ, as does Kate, so we'll be able to do that crosswalk there. And so we may reach out and do basically a check with you, like, hey, we see these projects, kind of give you a list, and you can essentially respond like, this one we ended up not doing, this one was only local funds, this one is still in flight. And won't be done until 2025 or whatever it may be. And then we'll sort of have that like first year crosswalk. Moving forward, I think that we want to just align this with fiscal year. And so you can sort of expect to have this as an update that we ask you to do likely in the summer. I don't know that we've totally decided on that, I know there's never a good time to ask you all to do data collections, but again, we're hoping this one becomes a pretty light touch. And then it will just be that kind of annual like reminder, hey, your data collection period for this is open, please go in and make those updates. So we're going to feel our way through this first one. That will be kind of the main cross check. Yeah, Brenda, I know I would actually like to incorporate this with StatBook as well, but I will explore that option. I'm going to say that we will explore that option. If we can incorporate it with anything you already do, then we will aim to do so. Yeah. Dan asked, would the building of a new middle school in our current space be put on one form? Dan, I think I want to like talk through that one. Is that going to be, that's sort of a future project, right?
No, we've already done it.
Oh,
so
and you use federal dollars to support it?
Yes. Yeah. And it has, it has the HVAC and all that stuff combined
right?
Within the project.
Yeah.
We may want to talk about that one, Dan. A lot of it depends on like how it was contracted, how it was accounted for on your end. One of the major pieces of consideration in all of this is end of useful life. And so it's likely that the different infrastructures in a new construction are going to reach end of useful life at different points. So you would have the structure itself, right? The actual building. And then within that, you would have several pieces of infrastructure that we would want to account for. I would like to bring that one back to our team and then perhaps get back to you in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think Dan talking through the project and what was funded with what is probably the critical piece there. But so Dan, just to say, and this is a broad statement for everyone, if it was, say you have, Main Street Middle, that is at this address, and like 4 pieces of that building project were paid for with federal funds: the HVAC, the windows, the new solar panels, and the something else. That would be 4 separate entries that you would do on that one address. So 4 entries in the web form, because
Yeah.
each system is its own thing.
Yeah.
Does that help to answer your question, or we can also talk through this specific project?
Yeah, that helps. It'd be nice to talk through it on another call
Okay.
or something.
So here's a question for folks. We want to give you a chance to dig in, get into the web form, talk to your own teams. How are you going to manage this, et cetera, et cetera. We can also do a couple of office hours. That's always kind of helpful. It gives you a chance to pop in and be like, oh, we're sitting down with this thing. And Dan, exactly to your point, like we got this one big weird project. What do we do? So we're happy, between now and January 19th to offer a couple of different office hours. If folks feel like that would be useful, we can just go ahead and schedule those, and you can then bring your funky questions in, and we can talk through them in real time. So if that's helpful, we can totally do that. And if none of y'all show up, that's always just some extra work time that Courtney and I get to talk through our list of stuff to do. So it'll be time well spent either way. So we'll go ahead and do that, just to have them available. And then that way, if you have folks who are maybe not as familiar, but you've assigned the work, they can come in and bring their questions as well. Courtney will take that as a to-do.
I shall.
We just like spending time with y'all. That's our goal. Are there
Especially
other
on
questions?
nuanced federal reporting
Oh my
requirements.
gosh.
It's everybody's favorite.
I would rather do this than annual performance reporting. All right. Other questions? I think this is one to just kind of get into it, frankly. As Elizabeth pointed out, and I swear we had intention there. We built this so that it aligns with your systems you already have, right? And like the record IDs that you already have, we didn't want to make anything new. Just plop it all in there, and then we'll be able to kind of just move forward after this first year. And I think it'll, as I said, I think it'll be a light touch moving forward. And we will get communication out. We'll get the slide deck out. We'll get the webinar closed caption. We'll make like a real property little web page on AOE here pretty soon. I've got a list of like 5 web pages that are being built right now to collect information. Again, feel free to reach out to Courtney and I if you have technical questions. Kate Horton is going to be managing the grind of it.
The data,
So
yeah.
yeah, the data. So Kate will be your person, and she'll have the web form access and all that stuff. So yes, I hope that you all, if you don't have the entire week off next week, like my kids, I hope you all have a really lovely holiday. Thank you for all of the amazing work that you do in your partnership, and that you never once have shown up with pitchforks and torches. I really appreciate that about you. Yes, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Very thankful for all of you, and reach out if you need us.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today, and we hope to hear from you soon. And I'm going to go ahead and end our recording now, and feel free to reach out as we mentioned.